Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. We are live and we have Rob Howard with us today. He is a speaker and someone that we know very, very well at Ellie Publishing. Rob is also the founder of the Online Language Center, and he has been everywhere. He is a highly sought after speaker. He's going to be talking today about artificial intelligence. I think pretty much Rob is an expert now in using AI responsibly in the classroom. So we'll find out by the end of today's session if Rob is a proponent for AI or it is all negative for him. I'm quite curious to know. Now, while Rob is an experienced teacher and a writer and an international trainer, he has had extensive experience in teacher development as well as education in technology. So I'm really, really excited to welcome Rob. Today, we will be exploring practical, responsible ways to use AI with course books in your English lessons. And the focus here is on supporting teachers. So all of you will find out how it is like using AI, whether it's going to save planning time, whether it's going to encourage and boost engagement in your classrooms, or even enhance existing materials that you use. Without further ado, I'm going to invite Rob, but before that, I'd like to inform all of you that any questions you might have, let's save it to the end. There's a question box on the top right hand of your screen. You can type in questions, you can type in experiences you'd like to share with us, opinions, no problems at all. We'll talk about that right at the end of today's session. And before the end of the session, please do not forget to download the PDF that has already been uploaded onto the platform. So without further ado, Rob, the floor is yours, and I welcome you to this webinar on today's session on using AI in English lessons. Thank you very much.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's a great pleasure to be here for Ellie Publishing once again. And welcome everybody around the world. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is the responsible use of AI tools. Now, if you've heard me speak in the past, I'm a very big proponent of not using AI badly. And I think, unfortunately, most people are. So what I want to do is give you some good ways that you can actually use AI tools that aren't taking you out of the limelight as the teacher. And again, I feel AI tools are good for the teacher, and they can be a help to augment your students' learning. But we don't want to replace the teacher. So to get started, what I'm going to talk about is some different things, the pre-teaching and preparation that teachers will do. And then we'll talk about some during the lesson activities that the students can use. And then we'll talk about some extension and post the lesson activities, which will be good for both. So to get started, for the teachers, first let's talk about pre-teaching and preparation. One thing, as you should always do, even with AI, is we want to activate the schema. So we want to generate warm-up questions, just like we do now. And this will help build with scaffolding. What we want to do is don't treat AI as something way out there and something totally different. Don't change up your teaching style. Stick with what you're used to and use AI just like you're opening up a different course book, of course, from publishing. So get people warmed up for the topic and talk about it a little bit, same as you would do in a regular class. And then you're going to summarize the different texts that are using in the course book itself and what you plan on using for AI. Now, this, of course, is important for scaffolding. and especially more important when you're at lower levels, because there you're going to find you may have a lot of different vocabulary that the AI generates for you that may not have been in the course book or may not have been on any of your vocabulary lists. And you need to be prepared for that and get students prepared for that. Now, make different kinds of worksheets available. AI is great for making up worksheets. Of course, always check. And I like to do different levels. I like to do an easy one as a warm-up. I like to do a medium one, and I usually do the hard one as a review, maybe before a test or before a quiz or when we finish up anything on the chapter. And base this around the same coursebook activity. Oftentimes people run out and they put in other material that's not focused and based around the coursebook. And this will run into problems with not keeping everything in line for you. Now, you want to show people exactly what it is you expect. Again, if you've been teaching for a long time and you do a lot of this, this is called modeling. You want to give them examples. So I actually show them model examples, how I would answer a question. You see in most course books, usually the first one might be done for you just to give an idea. It's the same concept, even working with AI. You know, show them the first answer first so they have an idea what's expected of them. I've always done this when I say, okay, you're going to write, you know, a story and I want you to start off with blah, blah, blah. I'll show them a sample of something that I've written. And this gives them an idea of the expectations. So there's no surprises. Make some vocabulary games, some matching activities from the unit or word lists. Remember, if we've been working with course books for years, you know, you had the old match, draw the line from this to that, maybe some gap fill activities. But here's something that you can do where you're basically mimicking what used to happen in the course book, and you're bringing out those course book materials and you're putting that into a different type of game. Now, remember, you're not sending them away to work with AI. You are the leader, okay? So you're running the game. You're still the moderator. And this is really important to keep the focus on the teacher, because this is, if you've heard me talk, what I'm worried about is teachers are giving away too much of the focus to AI. And then they lose credibility with their students because now the teacher isn't the expert anymore. We want to remain that way. So this is, again, being responsible on how you use it. And when you're doing grammar presentation, and I found this especially when I was working with teens, oftentimes it's great if you have 2 or 3 different ways of showing how the grammar works. One example, usually we have that little grammar box, which will give you one way of discussing the grammar. Come up with an alternative method that you can make that fit. What I used to do is when I was working with my teens, I actually assigned homework on the upcoming grammar box. And what I would do is we would have the teens, one of them would be teacher of the class, and they would explain the grammar in their own words. So it wasn't coming from me. It wasn't just coming from the textbook. It was coming from an alternative. And when it's coming from peers who understand usually the language the same as the other students, it's golden. It also keeps your students on their toes because they never know when they're going to be called on. Create mini dialogues. And what this will do is you can take the language from the unit and put this into, let's say, ChatGPT or Gemini. I use both. You can use whatever makes you happy. There's plenty of apps out there. But take the vocabulary words and give whatever the AI app is some prompt saying, I would like you to write a dialogue between two or more people discussing blah, 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 whatever the subject matter is. And here is some of the functional language that I want to use for vocabulary or phrases, or specifically if I'm working on grammar, to give as many examples in present perfect, for instance, if that's what I'm working on, and have them do these dialogues, because now what you're doing is you're having AI generate extra practice for the students where you can do pair and group work in the classroom with things that were produced specifically what's in line with the course book material. And then do comprehensive questions. You can do this in either a short quiz, you can do it in a longer quiz, you can do it with reading or listening text, all different ways you can do this, but make sure that you do comprehension questions to make sure that they are understanding and that they've consolidated this information that they've been taking in. Because we know, one of the problems with going towards ed tech is everything is so quick and learners are getting a shorter and shorter attention span. The problem with that, the shorter the attention span, the less time there is to get this consolidation that will go into long-term memory. So by doing these comprehension questions, whether they be true or false or whatever, we make sure we're taking a temperature and make sure that they're understanding. And AI can produce these very quickly and very easily. Of course, something we'll talk about later is, make sure you check them for accuracy and correctness. And make formative quizzes. Take the content, whether it be gap fill, whether it be multiple choice, and make additional quizzes that you can give the class based on all the course material that you've already covered from the chapter. And this will give you a good idea if there's anything you need to go back to. Sometimes you'll find that maybe the whole class didn't understand one word. This is the way that you're going to figure this out. So not only is it a quiz to test them, it's a quiz to test your ability to make sure they understand. And I'm not a big fan of Kahoot, but Kahoot is one of these things that you can use for a quick, quiz just to take a temperature. And what you want to do is you as a teacher should be keeping notes. For example, working with a course book years ago in the course that I worked in Brazil, I was teaching out of the same book every semester, just to different classes. And I was constantly making teacher notes that would help me so I'd remember for next time, maybe this didn't work so well, or this is something that I found worked better. If a student came up with a great explanation, I wrote it down because I was sure to use that the next year. So what you want to do is look at your teacher notes and then adapt them so you can relate more with the students. And again, this is all still part of pre-teaching and preparing for your classwork. Now, for the students, now these are things that we can do during the lesson activities themselves. AI speaking partners. Now, I won't go far into this. I'm not personally a big fan of AI chatbots. I would rather have my students talking with someone else in the class, a real live person, than talking to an artificial person on the other side. But there are a lot of speaking apps out there that, number one, are going to help them with, number one, their pronunciation, whether the chatbot is understanding them. Also, it's probably going to push them a little bit harder than dealing with another student that's at their own level. But these are things I think you should do it in class and not too much of it. Just a little bit, so you give them a taste. And then if they decide then to start working with chatbots outside of the classroom, they've seen how responsible use should be done. You can use these as a vocabulary coach. For instance, AI gives example sentences for new words. You know, this really is brilliant. It's nothing different than in the old days if you handed them a dictionary. And what they would do is, if you looked up in a good dictionary, I used Merriam-Webster's dictionary, I grew up with that. And if you open up the dictionary, there's always some sample questions. If you go to dictionary.com or thesaurus.com, if you use a lot of the online, even Google, they will give you example sentences using the new words. Now, I find this is extremely valuable because that way they see the word in context and they get to use it. So AI is good for writing example sentences for you, which can save you a lot of time and help you with vocabulary. Now, one activity you can do with this is give them 4 or 5 different example sentences and have them pick which one gives them the best idea of the vocabulary word that they're working with. And this will help them increase their critical thinking. The more they think about it, the more that they'll consolidate this, and the longer they're going to remember it. Now, a grammar explainer. Asking AI for clarification on grammar points. You know, I'll be honest, as an American, we didn't learn grammar very well. And when I first became an English teacher, I had to go back and learn a lot of grammar rules, only because we grew up speaking the language. We didn't need an awful lot. Yes, we got into grammar when we got more into the academic type writing and more advanced writing, but before that, we didn't know much. So having a grammar explainer is important. And I feel that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. A quick story. My stepdaughter came home from her science class every day saying, I didn't understand a thing my science teacher said. And she was not doing well in the science class. I had her go to Khan Academy at the end of each day when she started her homework and to look up the explanation of what it was the teacher taught that day. And she said, oh, that was easy. You know, remember, as teachers, I think of the present perfect. I've probably explained the present perfect 100,000 times in my career. But it's the first time that I'm explaining it to that one student. So maybe I didn't explain it as well as I should have for that student. So giving them some options like this and having them go to AI to explain some grammar is very good. Interactive role playing. They simulate real life scenarios from the unit, and they could use AI as a partner. You'll have to help them with prompts and teach them what to do for prompting to get an AI chatbot to work. Again, it depends on the level of technology you have in your classroom, what's available, if they're allowed to use their phones, if they have computers with them, whatever. But AI can work for this to give more practice. AI as a character. Now, what you can do, and this is something that I would do, is write up a prompt making AI into a character. And basically, it becomes part of a story, and the students have to ask questions of the AI bot to find out more information. This can get very elaborate, but it can be very fun and very valuable. Start working slowly. Instant feedback, especially for writing, put the writing into an AI correction and ask them how it is. I'm working right now on seeing who will do the best job. For writing correction, I like the way that Word, if you use Microsoft, works, where if I'm correcting a student's writing, I highlight what they did wrong, and then I show them what the correction should be, and then I explain why. I'm trying to get the chatbots to do this. I'm sure there's apps out there that do it, but this can be very valuable, using it for feedback on their writing. Pronunciation practice. This is one thing that I think is great. I have not seen so many times that AI's pronunciation isn't very good. Usually it's pretty spot on. Not always, though. But if you have students record their speech and they can either compare it to an AI model, actually, any speech to text application is basically AI. It's an artificial intelligence tool that's been around for years. And I've always used this, especially with like my students that were taking TOEFL or IELTS, is I would have them talk to a speech to text app and then go back and make sure that they were understood correctly. Actually, my English isn't very good. I'm American, but I found that when I use speech to text, every time I say in, it's writing and. So even I have a problem pronouncing the word clearly enough. And this is good practice. Pronunciation practice, always good. Using it as a translation aid. Have it go through. I don't have a problem with students using L1. And I think that we've made such a big deal about using L1 in the classroom over the years. And quite frankly, the reality is they're going to use both languages throughout their life. They need to be able to switch back and forth quickly. Case in point, I was trying to teach 30 teenagers the word wool. in Rio de Janeiro. They've never heard of wool in their life. I said, wool, the thing you make a sweater out of. Now, it's 30 to 40 degrees centigrade in Rio de Janeiro. They don't wear sweaters. Then I was using sheep. They didn't know what a sheep was. Lamb. It would have been much quicker if I just translated and used L1 and said, well, which is Portuguese for wool. And they would have said, okay, because chances are they're never going to use it again. They only need it for the test. Vocabulary storytelling. Have AI help them build a story by putting the vocabulary words into the AI chatbot and have them help them create a story. Always fun. And use storytelling in the classroom. Get feedback. Have students ask questions. You get a little bit of a break with a little bit of AI input, but the focus is still in the classroom, still on the students, and still on the teacher. And of course, the course book. AI quiz battles. You can have groups compete against each other in doing AI generated comprehension quizzes. Always fun. Kids especially love to compete. Everybody loves to compete. Have some fun. Let them go through and play against it. It gives a little bit of a break. It shouldn't be your whole class, but it could be 10, 15 minutes out of your class. Will break up the monotony and really help. Now, let's move on to post lesson. And these are things that you can do for both you and your students. AI as a homework helper. Again, this would, if they want to go to an AI chatbot or use something similar to what my stepdaughter did with Khan Academy, make sure that they understood the lesson and they can use AI to help them with their homework. And you know what? There's a lot of people out there saying, well, the kids are using AI to do their homework. My answer to this is I cheated as a kid. I bet you everybody in this room, let me see, how many are you now? 373 of you. I bet you everyone there cheated on their homework. And I'm judging by the thumbs up and the smiles, you did. People are going to cheat. Kids are going to cheat. I've always said if they're going to cheat, they're only cheating themselves. So you cannot be a constant policeman and worry about it. What you want to do is try and get them to use AI as a helper, not to do all the work. And an important thing to remember, that goes for you too as the teacher. Don't let AI do all your work, because then you build this vicious cycle where the teacher generates work with AI, the student does the work with AI, the teacher corrects the work with AI, and nobody's learned anything except the AI app. So just make sure you talk to them about it, and again, teach them responsible use of AI. Now, next one, personalized revision summaries. This is where you can actually take and generate and personalize some extra work based on what your students are having difficulty on. Now, when we go back to the quizzes that we did, we'll find out where they were having trouble. And then this is something I can go back as the teacher and come up using AI to generate some additional materials, something that goes beyond what the course book had, to help them to understand, practice, and focus. I know when I was young doing math, sometimes I'd get the right answer right away, but I wasn't sure of the process, if I was doing the process right. So getting extra examples and then checking the answers to make sure I could do it 5 or 6 times, that was invaluable for me. Writing expansion. Now, have them take the short article, let's say from the course book. There's always nice articles for reading and comprehension. And what they can do is make a bigger text based on AI suggestions. So you can take that text from the book, put it into AI, and say, can you expand this into a bigger story, giving more details about whatever the particular things are that you want more detail on. So this gives them an additional story that they can read and work on themselves. Now, error analysis basically speaks for itself. It goes through and it'll identify and explain the problems that they're having from the student work. And this is something that I think is important for us, because error analysis, as I said before, is as much our fault as it is the student's fault, because perhaps we didn't present it the proper way. And I know, we had the party the night before. We have a lot of work we have to do. Your husband, your wife, had an argument. Your boss is screaming at you. It changes the way and affects our teaching. So let's find out what we did wrong based on what they didn't understand. Okay? So use it as a tool for both of us. And then take one of the stories from the course book that you have and rewrite it. There's lots of ways that you can do this creatively. And I love this activity. I used to do this where I would take news stories, have them make it into a story, and vice versa. In fact, think of, a simple a nursery rhyme like Jack and Jill went up the hill. Have them write that as a news story for a newspaper or for the online news. And they can get information, all the facts on different stories using ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. And have them do this. Comprehension check. Okay, review questions. You as the teacher can put the reading into ChatGPT and ask it to generate 5 questions. You can come up with it yourself, but you can do both. Use AI for that, so it comes up with maybe more difficult questions that you yourself would ask. So you're doing a little checkup just to see how they're doing with comprehension. And alternative listening. Have AI summarize or make a transcript for additional support. So if they're doing a listening text, doing a listening section, there are AI apps that'll take that and make a transcript out of it, and then you can put that in and summarize it. Follow-up projects. I love projects. I'm big on project-based learning. I think it's one of the most effective ways that they get hands-on way to work with this. So they can design posters, emails, blogs, all based around the unit theme. and use AI to help them develop this. AI simulated test questions. So if they have a big test coming up, give them a little short quiz based on the course book material. And then have AI ask them reflexive questions. And this is something that'll get them to think and personalize themselves so they get a better idea what they need to get help on. And again, what you want to do is align all of this with the different stages of the course book. Remember, I'm a little upset with newer teachers this year because they think the course book isn't good. You know what? The course book has been developed for years by experts, not just one person, a team, and they're so good. And I really think it's a shame that people haven't been using the teacher's book as they should. I made this argument at a conference a few months ago, and we were in one of the teachers' classrooms. I said, "Let me see your teacher book." And embarrassedly, they handed it to me because although she's been teaching with that course book for 5 years, she never even opened the teacher's book. And there's so much material that's in there. Don't forget you have these available. All right, so some examples. Well, first of all, I used Planet English, which you may notice here. Here's the elementary. You see the student book. And I use this for the source of my materials. So depending on the level that you're teaching. And for instance, here's Unit 2, which is talking about my house. Here's some screenshots of what the book has. And this is what I did, is I took the information and I gave basically a quick, easy prompt to, this was ChatGPT. And I said, come up with a reading activity that I can do based on the information from Unit 2 of Ready for Planet English Elementary. And I put in the information that I wanted. And this is one of the ideas that it came up with. And this is what I mean about responsible use. Let them help come up with things. Here's Unit 3, Jobs and Sports. And it came up with a good listening activity where AI was to write a 90-second dialogue between two teenagers discussing a particular sport and what the rules are. And here's the procedure, here's the follow-up. Now, this was all done in a matter of seconds using AI. And I feel this is good because it's not replacing me as the teacher. It's giving me some tools to work with the students. Here's Unit 4 talking about my life. And this was a speaking activity it created, my day versus your day. And basically it gave you a scenario. One was an exchange student talking to a friend about their daily routine, ask about school times. Okay. Again, good use. Here was a writing one for my life for Unit 4. Writing diary entries. Okay. Specifically, this points out using then, after that, and finally. Okay, so it's getting specific based on the specific information that they had from the course book. Again, from the prompts that I put in. Here's Unit 5 was on education. This one creates a speaking activity at the UN Youth Forum, gives you all the rules, and I hope you've downloaded the PDF. All these are there and available. They were written by ChatGPT, so I don't own them. You can use them. Here's a writing activity talking about a big thing that's important these days, sustainability, and talking about our green school. And this is writing a paragraph using should, must, and can. So, we're always looking for ideas. That's where AI can help. Here's Unit 8, talking about travel and transportation. Created a 1-minute audio for teens comparing their daily routines. One from Italy, one from Japan. I should have changed that to Poland. Here's another one, a reading activity. Okay, and here's some extras. These are just some basic ideas. AI generated flashcards, quizzes, matching games, transcripts, speech recognition, dialogue expanders, debate questions, error correction, progress reports. Take a look at the PDF. There's so much we can do with AI to augment what we have in the course book without giving up our classroom to AI. Again, keeping us the focus. Now, a few caveats, a few warnings. First of all, it's very important that you confirm everything. A funny story is when I originally started to do this, I said, generate blah, blah, blah over 2 different units from specifically named the book, and it came up with some activities. And I sent them to Ellie and said, can I match this up and confirm that this is correct? And they said, wait a minute, that's not our material for those chapters and units. I asked ChatGPT what was the ISBN number that they took that from, and it gave a fictitious number. Now, the problem was they were great activities, but they did not match what was in the course book. So I went back and had to go to Plan B and start from the course book, which I should have done in the first place, and took that information and plugged it in and made the activity fit what was in the course book. So always confirm that the information is correct. And there is a lot of bad information in these LLMs, in these apps. Confirm everything. I realize it's an extra step, but it's an important step, because especially in this day and age where people can check on everything, you don't want to come up with something that your student comes back and said, you're wrong, teacher. There goes credibility. Very important when you're using other materials and using other people's materials, it is very important to ask permission. I'm a big stickler on copyright. My pictures here all come from Microsoft, and I have permission to use these. So I get permission on everything. If you're using a movie clip, if you're using a song, there are guidelines, which is a whole nother talk of how much you can use for education purposes, but get permission. I think this is a moral thing. As a songwriter myself, and a book author, I make my money that way. When people don't ask permission and use my material, I look at it, that's stealing, and it's stealing money from me. Access. Make sure that your students do have access. This, probably not a big problem in Italy. I don't think it's a big problem in Poland. but maybe in some countries, they may not have internet access. They may not have a computer at home. They may not have a cell phone. They may not have data packages to use the phone. So make sure that what you're doing with AI is appropriate to all your students and that all your students do have access to it. Nothing worse than half of the class coming back and saying, well, I don't have a computer in my house. I couldn't do any of this work at home. You should have known that beforehand. So find out what your students do have access to and adjust accordingly. Monitor them. This again is safe and responsible use of AI. I tend to, if I'm having them do any projects where they are minors under 18 in the United States and in many countries, if they're doing any project which might be online, which might be using an app, which might show their face or any kind of personal information, I make sure I get written permission from their parents first. I don't need to be sued, either does the school that I work for. And, you know, this is another permission. I have stacks of papers because I had my students making films and I have permission to use them. Now they're all in their 30s, so it's okay. Now they're just mad that I'm showing what they look like as a teenager. Confirm and reconfirm. Check and double check. Make sure that everything is okay. And again, as I talked about copyright, don't break copyright. You'll notice that I notice in a lot of these talks that people say, oh, you just put this movie into this app and it'll give you a transcript. You better read the information because on the app that this particular person who was a big name was recommending, in the app itself, if you read the terms and conditions, it says you are not allowed to use any copyright material, even for education purposes. So you're actually breaking the law. You don't need that. So with that, that's what I have to say. And I'll see how we're doing and what we have for maybe some questions or comments.
That was actually really, really good. I was listening attentively. It's crazy
I
how
hope so.
yes, I was. And the best news is that I can always listen to you again because we will be getting a recording of this webinar. So that's really, really exciting. Now, we have a few questions for you, Rob. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah, one of the questions I'm just going to read out here from the chat box. Sergey, I hope I've said your name correctly because forgive me if I haven't, Mr. or Miss Jacobson. The question here is actually really, really simple, but quite, I think it requires an intensive response from you. Can you give some chatbot tools, sorry, not chatbox, chatbot tools? That was the question by Jacobson. Would you be able to answer that, Rob?
No, because I don't use them.
Right.
So I won't recommend anything for a chatbot. I know there's a ton out there. Everybody recommends them. Personally, I'm not a big fan. You know, I'm human. I trained for years to be human. And people come to my classes to talk to a human, not to a chatbot. So I won't recommend anything. Experiment.
Brilliant. Okay, great. So a couple of other questions, which I'm just going to read out here, if you don't mind. You talked about responsible use of AI in everyday classroom practice. This question here is about sustainability. Where do you see AI having the biggest long-term impact on lesson planning with course books? That is a question. Shall I repeat that for you?
No. uh, we could do a whole nother hour on that.
Right.
It really, I think, and one of the reasons that I'm doing this is AI is obviously here to stay, for good or for bad. All the publishers have to work with it. I know everybody's developing AI and digital side for their course book. It's the future. Nothing wrong with the future. At one point, we used to write on chalkboards. You know, it's just one more tool, one more innovation. But I think for me, I'm very happy that the publishers are getting involved, because at least the publishers, the people that work there, have studied pedagogy and methodology. The majority of the apps that are out there are done by 15, 16, 17-year-old coders who, skateboard during the day, know nothing about teaching, nothing about education. They just know gamification and how to keep you hooked. That is a bad thing. So I think kudos for all the publishers that are, getting behind this. There are some apps that are education based. I'm not going to name anything in particular, but be very, very selective in your choices, because remember, the people that are doing this are doing it to make money, not to educate students.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that is very, very well said. Another question from Atef. Did you want to add something, Rob? I'll just read out the question you. Yes. This one's interesting. It's a simple question, but really interesting as well. How can we prevent students from using AI to improve a text, or simply copying its suggestions without using that, without thinking, basically?
You can't.
That's what I
Next
thought.
question. No, it's basically, and we've been having this discussion. I had it today with one of my students.
Mm-hmm.
I write books. I then send it to an editor, or I put it into Grammarly, not me, but somebody else, or I put something that I say into ChatGPT, and or I might send it to Social and say, "Oh, what do you think? Can you give me some feedback on this?"
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Now, like I say, everybody cheats. Everybody's going to continue to cheat. You're
Mm-hmm.
only cheating yourselves. It's like me. I've been living in Poland for years, and I used this for Polish. As a result, I can't speak Polish. So I've cheated myself.
Absolutely, absolutely correct. We have some really, really interesting questions coming in through here. I'm going to read
Great.
another one this time again by Atef. Thank you, Atef. And keep those questions coming in.
Yeah.
It's always nice, for us to have an interactive session. This is, after all, a professional development session for teachers like me. The question here is, Rob, does relying on AI for everything cause teachers to lose their detailed understanding of the challenges their classes face? Are they risking using generic, off-the-shelf materials that won't engage their students? This is a pretty good question. Thank you very much, Atif.
Interesting question, but I'll take this back. Remember that AI is just one more tool. We could have said the same thing about the course book. We could have said the same thing about virtual reality, about internet, everything. It's up to the teacher how well they maintain their ability to be a teacher. And the passion, this is another talk I do, is bringing back the passion. I became a teacher, obviously, for the money. No, for the passion that I had to teach. And, I don't, a lot of people are going to lose themselves in AI, and they're going to do everything AI. And I see it. at conferences where people are doing talks already. And I wouldn't want them to be my teacher, quite frankly. So yeah, we're going to end up with bad teachers, just like everything in life. We'll end up with bad everything. The teacher who remembers that I have a student, I have a person sitting in front of me, I have a bunch of you out there listening to me, and I care about your needs. That's the teacher that's going to be great for the rest of their career. I hope that
Absolutely.
helped.
No, that was amazing. That was actually a true statement, I must say. Right, I'm going to have time for a couple more questions. The next
Sure.
one is by Mr. or I'm sorry, it could be a Miss Radawi. Thank you very much for this question. And it is, to what extent can AI tools be considered reliable in language learning? And how can learners' progress be effectively assessed when these tools are used?
Too soon to tell. Quite honestly, the research that's been coming out, which I follow, which is why I do my negative AI talks also. If you're looking at like studies out of MIT, studies out of Duke University, studies out of China, not just the United States, they're showing that reading comprehension, memory, consolidation, all the scores are dropping. So, you know, can you
Yeah.
blame it on AI? Can you blame it on the students? Can you blame it on society? I blame it all on TikTok. My parents blamed it on TV. Some people blamed it on rock and roll. You know,
Right.
it's the dumbing down of society. The easier things become and the more tools we have to take away, basically the dumber we are. A case in point, I have two brother-in-laws, brilliant, wonderful guys, but they don't know how to use a screwdriver. Just because they didn't have to, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yes, we find that happening a lot in today's society. We just pay people to do things like this for us, don't we, Rob? I'm sure
That's it.
everyone. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm that guy. Pay me.
It's a skill. It's a
Yeah.
skill because I have a question here that I'm going to, that's probably going to be the last question.
Mhm,
But before that, I'm just going to read out a question by Alicia.
mhm.
Alicia asks, how can teachers effectively, and you probably covered this a little bit in your presentation as well. Her question is, how can teachers effectively integrate AI tools into coursebook-based lessons to enhance learning without losing the structure and objectives provided by the textbook? That's a question.
Use it sparingly. There's, what was it from Mary Poppins? A teaspoon of sugar makes the medicine go down.
Yes.
Just use a little bit. Case in point, I'll go back to the old musical gap fill, which I
Mm-hmm.
hate. The teacher would say, okay, I'm going to play you this song for 5 minutes. And then they hand you the gap fill, and then they play the song again for 5 minutes. And then they go back and correct it and play it again for 5 minutes. Now
Right.
they've just wasted 15 minutes of class time for 10
Mm-hmm.
words you'll probably never use ever again.
Right.
That's a lazy teacher. And using it responsibly in just short little bursts, you know, just to make it a little bit different.
Yeah.
It's the same when we get the interactive whiteboard. You don't want to be swiping everything all day in class. It makes people dizzy and seasick. Use it just sparingly.
Fantastic. I'm going to round up today's session with a final question from Christina. Christina's it's a thought-provoking question, I must say. Do you think teachers or some teachers will be replaced with AI in the future? AI can already speak so many foreign languages. Now, I'm sure, Rob, you've been asked this question many, many times. I'm actually curious to know what you have to say.
Well, people have been saying that teachers who don't embrace AI will be replaced. I disagree with that. I actually think AI will replace bad teachers. No one will ever replace a good teacher, no matter
Mhm.
what. You know, we may not have a job at a university or a public school anymore someday because of AI, but we'll always have tutoring, we'll always have mentoring. People need the personal touch. It's
Absolutely.
important, you know, it I think a lot of bad teachers out there should be replaced with AI because AI would do a better job. Those are the ones that should worry.
Brilliant. Perfect. I really like that. Okay, now we are at the end of today's session. I have seen we have had almost 400 people from all over the world, from Morocco, from Argentina, and even from Tirana, Albania. I was there last week, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly. Amazing people from Albania. I would like to thank all of you for being part of today's session. Please follow us on Facebook. We are constantly having professional development events such as this one, and we hope to see you during our future sessions. And Rob probably will be hosting one, hopefully further down the year. So this is
Yep.
my opportunity to thank a big thank you to you, Rob, for this wonderful, clear,
Thank
practical. It was thought provoking. It was thought provoking, and I'm so glad I participated in this session. Now, your insights really, for me, have shown how AI can genuinely support teachers.
Mhm.
How you can couple it with course book lessons and
Yeah.
use it in a responsible and purposeful way. We
Yep.
thank you so much for sharing your experience and for inspiring us to take learning
Good.
beyond the page. So thank you again.
And if I could just give a shout out to IATEFL Poland, I would love all of you to come and watch our webinar series every Wednesday. And we're going to have a very special guest in June, Sushil. So I encourage you to come and watch her work
Thank
for
you.
me this time. So
It will be my absolute pleasure. I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I'm looking forward to see everyone here today for all of the upcoming sessions that we are going to be organizing. Thank you again, Rob. Wish you a wonderful, wonderful day wherever you are in whichever part of the world. And I'll hope to see you very, very soon. The beach. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
thanks,
Lots and lots of
everybody.
loves, lots and lots of hearts. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye now.